For our closing keynote, we're honored to welcome to the stage Janet Marie Smith. Janet, yes. Janet currently serves as the Executive Vice President of Planning and Development for the Los Angeles Dodgers. She's the highest ranking woman in the Dodgers front office, and if you roll back the clock, was one of the first women to hold a VP title for an MLB team. And for those reasons alone, she was an ideal choice to close out our second annual Women in Sports and Entertainment Conference. In addition to overseeing the renovations at Dodger Stadium, Janet has held VP level positions with the Baltimore Orioles, or as they say, Baltimore, Atlanta Braves, and Boston Red Sox, where she was responsible for the creation, at the Orioles, Janet was responsible for the creation of Oriole Park at Camden Yards, the ballpark that changed baseball, the conversion of Atlanta's Olympic Stadium to Turner Field, and the development of the Atlanta Hawks Arena. And following all of that, she took on the renovation of the revered Fenway Park. Among her many recognitions, Janet Marie was featured in Sports Business Journal Game Changers inaugural class of 2011, selected in Sports Business Journal's Class of Champions in 2017, nominated for the Women of Inspiration WISE LA Chapter Award in 2014, and inducted into the Mississippi Sports Hall of Fame in 2020. In 2022, as the demand for Janet Marie's leadership, design capabilities, and knowledge of real estate and development continued to extend beyond the baseball world, she founded Elysian Park Planning, now called Canopy Team, an independent design firm responsible for handling a range of projects related to sports and cities from conception to inspection. Janet holds a Bachelor of Architecture degree from Mississippi State University and a Master's in Urban Planning from City College of New York. She's married to Bart Harvey, and together they have 3 children, all recent college graduates. I could say a lot about Janet Marie, but instead, let me quote writer and pundit George Will. Quote, "The 3 most important things that have happened in baseball since the Second World War were Jackie Robinson taking the field in 1947, free agency arriving in 1975, and Oriole Park at Camden Yards opening in 1992, which is why Major League Baseball owes a debt to Janet Marie Smith." Will cites the 16 Major League parks that opened in downtown settings since Camden Yards opened, and points out that these ballparks have changed how people use cities. Join me in welcoming Janet Marie Smith. So, Janet, it's amazing looking at your career that your first job in sports, working for the Baltimore Orioles to create Camden Yards, proved to be such a game changer. That early on in your career, where did you find the confidence to veer from the industry norms?
Well, I had been working for about 10 years after college when I applied for the job with the Orioles. And I think that's significant because I had learned in another environment things that I thought could be applied to sports. And sometimes I think we get caught up in sports, sort of recycling sports. And I really felt, looking at stadium design, that there was another way of doing things, and that the work I had done in New York at Battery Park City and here rethinking downtown Los Angeles could be applied in a different way. So when I found out the Orioles were building this ballpark in downtown Baltimore and were desirous of having it be part of the city, at first I was, the baseball fan in me was like, shucks, I really like Old Memorial Stadium. It's kind of got an old shoe quality to it. But then I had this eureka moment several weeks later. By the way, that's something I had learned just sitting in the stands watching a game that a fan had told me. So I had this idea that that would be a project that would fit my interests and skills. So I wrote a letter to Larry Lucchino, who was then the president of the Orioles, and it'd be tempting to say that the rest is history, but I had to really work to get in after I wrote that letter. It wasn't like it landed on his desk and bubbled to the top. I had to really work the phones, as they say, to get in, to get that interview. But I did a lot of homework before that interview, and that worked.
Well, it's always good to be prepared, and you're nothing if not prepared. You've navigated 2 male-dominated industries. What lessons did you learn along the way that became your way of breaking the glass ceiling?
Well, I think whether you look at architecture and construction or whether you look at sports, there really has been a deficit of women in positions that are of leadership and power, and that's changing, obviously, because look what we have here today. It's amazing to me. But I think that I guess I was never intimidated by that. I just felt I felt I knew what I felt. I brought something to the table, and I tried to be very clear about what I could do to influence things. And there's a fine line between being clear and sort of making your point being noisy, and I always try to balance that, because it's easy to be noisy too. And yet I think that having working outside of sports gave me some confidence as well as some credibility, and I think probably gave me some credibility on urban planning issues that weren't sitting at that table in Baltimore planning this ballpark. And I enjoyed having something different, and I think that's sometimes when we bring something different to the table, we worry about we're somewhat insecure that we don't speak the language of everyone else around us, and sometimes you can look at it the inverse and say, but I'm an expert on that. And so I've tried to lean into the latter.
Janet, I'm assuming that somewhere along the way, like many of us, there were mentors and teachers in your professional career. Who were some of those mentors? I know Jeannie earlier mentioned Billie Jean King and how she became not only her hero but also a mentor and friend. But who mentored you throughout your professional career, and what did they teach you that still resonates with you today?
My very first job in New York, while I was still a student in architecture at Mississippi State, was a woman. And Katie was the only woman of any seniority in this architectural firm that had been around since the 20s. All the principals were men, except for Katie Carton. And Katie was just amazing to me. I can still picture her walking into a room and just the way she commanded that room. And so she was not only a mentor to me, but maybe almost more importantly, a role model, because I watched how poised she was, how confident she was, that she had something to say at that table. She was responsible for marketing, and she really knew how to do that. And so I watched these men sort of take a back seat when she told them how to present something. And I learned from her not only sort of the poise that it took, but also the language she spoke. And I've always felt that there are a lot of people with a lot of good ideas out there, but that struggle to communicate them concisely and passionately and with a convincing manner. And Katie could do all of those things. And so I really worked hard. I wanted to be like Katie. I really worked hard to try to improve the way I could present things. And that was really important to me, to have her. And then a short time later, when I went to work for the Battery Park City Redevelopment Authority, I had a woman, Amanda Burden, who was my boss there. And the grace with which Amanda could do things was phenomenal to me. And she was never afraid to ask something twice. If she didn't understand it or wasn't buying it, she would ask again. And she wasn't afraid to say, well, that doesn't feel right, let's go out and tape it off. Things that I think sometimes we feel like, oh, everybody else must be smarter, must get it. But Amanda wasn't like that. She was like, let's just all go do it together. So I think having those two women so early in my career as bosses made a huge difference to me. Now, I haven't had a woman boss since, but those two were so strong and so they just so defined what I wanted to be that I still have images of both of them locked in my head.
Well, as someone who has the pleasure of getting to be in your orbit and see how you navigate the Dodgers, I think it really resonated, and I can see that you're continuing to do that and setting an example of confidence and preparedness and just leading gracefully within this organization. So I think,
they're still with you.
Yeah, they're still with you. But in there you spoke about kind of what, the confidence that they had that really spoke to you. And I'm curious what you believe the secret weapon is to being successful, if there is a secret weapon in your career. Can you point to it and tell us a little bit?
Well, I don't, a secret weapon. I do think it's the communication skills, and I think that is so important no matter what you do, is being able to convey an idea. And I often like to think of having three languages: words and pictures and numbers. Because if you have those three things, your audience will respond to something. There's something in there, whether you're presenting it in terms of quantifying it, whether you're presenting it in terms of its emotion, or whether you're presenting it in terms of it could be like this. And that I don't always succeed at that, but that was a lesson I learned decades ago, and I still try to think of it that way. And I'm still learning to master an Excel sheet, but I'm still trying to figure out that in Photoshop. But it's gotten the languages are so much more sophisticated, but I still think there's relevance in thinking that way, that your audience doesn't always know what you're talking about, and so how do you present things to them?
We've talked a bit about sort of what can drive women in their careers and motivate them in a way that's maybe uniquely us. And how, knowing sort of where you've come in your career, how do you use your success and platform to continue advocating for and creating more opportunities for women who are coming up behind you?
Well, I think we all try to support other women, both overtly and just maybe naturally, because perhaps as women we listen more closely to other women. And I guess one of my favorite examples was when Stan Kasten asked me to take this job 11 years ago, when Mark Walters and Bobby Patton and team bought the Dodgers. I started working here in August, and Stan said to me, we want to present ourselves on our first opening day next April as an agent of change. I want the players to have a new clubhouse. I don't want to show them renderings. I don't want to promise it to the next year. I want them to come in and have a new clubhouse. It's a building that was built in 1962, and some of those restrooms upstairs are still 1962 and not in a good way. And we put together a list of things that we thought would be relevant to Dodger Stadium, and we outlined how we could accomplish it over a 2-year period. And our chairman, Mark Walters, looked at it and he said, I like it all, and I'd like it by April. And so I kind of gulped, because as I said, this was August, and I know there are women here in architecture and construction, so you will appreciate that going from design to completion in what was that, 7 months on a $100 million project is nearly impossible. And so it would have been nice to have thought methodically about who to call, but I did not have that luxury, so I called the best people I could and that I knew could get the job done. But since I had orbit that included a lot of women, that included people like Brenda Levin as one of the two architects on this project, Mia Lair and Studio MLA as the landscape architect, Kimberly Whitman, who was our MVP managing all of our permitting. And there was a moment in this whirlwind as we tried to get this work done where someone stopped the construction meeting and said, can we just look around this room? It was a trailer full of people, but more than half of them were women, something almost unheard of on a $100 million fast-track sports construction project. And I love that because it wasn't that I didn't go to stack the room. I called the best people I knew, and I knew a lot of women. And the other thing I love about that story, years later, it is years later, right? That's 11 years ago now. Mia Lair tells this very funny story about when I called her. She says, I don't know anything about baseball. I said, you don't really need to. I need you to work on the plazas. We're going to work on how to navigate around the building. We need to figure out how to make it feel luxurious, but we've got and nicely landscaped, but we have, tens of thousands of people at a time. And their work on amusement parks and other things had that same kind of quality where you're handling tons of people coming in, but you want it to feel very great, a really accommodating, beautiful place. So fast forward 10 years, Mia laughs and she says, now I'm the go-to for sports. She's done sci-fi, she's been called by the Rose Bowl, she's done the USC Memorial Coliseum. So it's sort of proof that we've always known this, right? All you need is one on your resume and then you're an expert too. You just need to give someone to give you that one chance. So I love that I've been in a position to do that, and I hope we all will get to know each other so that when the time comes to make a fast decision, we know each other and are able to call on each other for that.
I want to pivot I want to pivot for just a moment to kind of like the work, the personal and the professional. You were a working mother. You had all three of your children during incredibly busy periods throughout your career. How did you manage that? And what, if any, advice can you share with us today? Those that are mothers, those that are thinking about maybe being mothers, those that are close with other women that are mothers and struggling how to balance it all?
Well, I don't know that I have any advice, but I can tell you what I did. Maybe you'll find a kernel of that in it. I had all three of my children working for Stan Kasten when he was in Atlanta. Stan is fond of saying you were always pregnant. That's not true. I wasn't always pregnant. Maybe he remembers it that way. But I actually, if I think about it, I'm pretty sure I was pregnant when he hired me, and I think maybe visibly pregnant too. So that's cool, right? Let's give Stan props for that. I don't know what I did really. I was commuting. I lived in Baltimore, and I was commuting to Atlanta every week. And the first baby, I took maybe 4 or 5 weeks off. The second baby, 2 years later, I took maybe 6 or 7 weeks off. The third baby, I just took the baby to work with me. And I just was like, well, no, that's just the way it's going to be. I don't know why I decided that was a good idea, but that's what I did. And because I was commuting, I had a college roommate that lived in Atlanta. I poached on her babysitter, and I just sort of made it all work. The baby would need me, and I'd say, I have another meeting to go to, and I'd run upstairs and take care of the baby and then come back, and somehow we all lived through it. And what I managed to do during all those years, I'm still a mother, of course, but now they don't need their lunch boxes filled and they don't need anyone to drive. But what I did during all those years was to use Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday as my really intense days, and that's when I would travel and that's when I would be away, and so I could always be counted on to do Monday, Friday carpool and the cupcakes and the soccer game and whatever it was. And my husband and I would absolutely say I couldn't have done this without both a supportive workplace and a supportive spouse, but Bart managed his travel so that he was gone first part of the week, I was gone last part of the week. So there was always a parent at home. And I think the thing that I am amused about most now is if you say something to my kids, and they're all in their 20s, about that, they're like, huh? Like, they don't remember that. And so you realize that sometimes you're more sensitive to every little moment maybe than they are. I think they remember me being there, both for the important things and for the everyday things. And so I don't know, maybe it just kind of works. I will share one other little anecdote about being a new mother that stuck with me. When I was working for Stan in Atlanta the first time, I also reported up through the real estate chain at Turner Broadcasting, and my other boss was Bunky Helfrich. And Bunky had children from a first marriage that were grown, and he had a son that was 5 or 6 at the time. And I remember being in a meeting, we had all these people from out of town, and it was so important. We were really going at it around the conference table, and Bunky looks at his watch and he says, oops, 5:15, I have to go. And I'm like, I can't believe he's leaving, and he's leaving me with all these people, and I couldn't believe it. And he sort of finished his sentence before I finished my thought. He says, Teddy has a swim meet. And I said something about it to him the next day, and he said, I missed some important things for my children the first time around. I'm not doing it this time. And that stayed with me, that sometimes the swim meet is important, So I don't know, we all find little nuggets of things that matter to us. And I never stopped working. I love my work. And I always would say to my husband, not that he was prompting me to do anything else, but I would just say, I think there's something important about my children having a sane mother. And for me to be sane, I need to be working. So that's how that went for us.
I think sane mother's always a good thing.
Aspirational, but still a good thing.
And I think at least what I took from that is a supportive workplace. It's really important. And then it sounds like that same ability to communicate what you needed to be able to thrive in your organization was also a key factor there. So thank you for sharing that. I definitely don't want to leave today without you telling us a little bit about Canopy Team and your newest venture. So if you could share a bit more about what y'all are doing.
Well, this is sort of an interesting evolution, and I don't want to make it a long story, but it's interesting to me that during the years that I've worked for the Dodgers, we've had several really big projects, and then we had years that we did much smaller projects that didn't really require as intense a focus from me and my team and the development and planning side. And as many of you in sports know, you don't call someone else with another team without permission from that team. And so several times we had calls that came to Stan, could I help on some other project? In baseball, like I'm sure in other sports, we're competitive on the field, but not in the front office. Like, we really support each other in business. So helping other clubs was A-okay as long as we could manage it all. And after some years of doing this, we were like, well, Stan was like, this looks like a business to me. Like, this just looks like a business to me. I don't know why you haven't turned this into a business. And I just thought, golly, I'm a project person. Like, I know what I'm good at, and I don't know if I can turn it into a business. But every now and then, things just fall in place. And so maybe this is back to my point about knowing other professionals and following them through their careers. 20 years ago, I had a summer intern by the name of Fran Weld when I worked for the Boston Red Sox. In the 20 years since she worked for me, when she worked for me, she had just graduated from MIT with a physics degree. She was planning to go to New York and be a scientist. At the end of the summer, she came to me and she said, "I'm not going to do that. I got the bug. I love working on this renovation of Fenway and working on the historic tax credits and chronicling how all these things happen and managing the combination of government and the planning department and all how this comes together. But I'm going to change lanes." I was like, oh no, Fran, this is terrible. The world needs more women scientists. I don't think I want this on my watch. But she was determined, and she went and worked for a developer for a while. Then she got her MBA at Stanford, and then she worked for the San Francisco Giants, overseeing their $3 billion Mission Rock development. And so about a year ago, she moved to the East Coast and was looking for something else to do. And I'm like, Fran, I got it. So we brought Fran in, which made all this sense in the world to me, someone who's got a business degree, knows how to put together a business, and together we've turned this into a business. And it's really fun to be able to work on so many different projects and to work at both scales, because I really love being able to talk about transportation and government initiatives and how you can change a city by having sports act as sort of your civic square, your vehicle for bringing people together. And then at the other end of the spectrum, the nostalgia that's associated with your memorabilia and with building an effective museum and the displays and the graphics. And so our team works at both ends of that spectrum. And we think of Dodger Stadium as our petri dish. Don't judge us by the transportation, but we still love everything else about it. And so it's really fun to have a chance to work with someone that I've respected so much for all these years and who's had such an accomplished career, and have her take this over.
That's great. And just so that women here have context about just like how much y'all touch and sort of how it's in our everyday lives, can you share, whatever projects are not sort of confidential, can you share a bit about some of the projects y'all are working on?
Let's see, I'll just rattle off a few. We've been working with the Pittsburgh Pirates for the last few years on some improvements to beautiful 20-year-old PNC Park. And when they first called, we were like, wait a minute, your park is always in the top 5. Like, what could we do to make it better? And yet, we try to sort of think about the whole fan experience. And after being there for a few months, it kind of clicked that the 100% of the fans at Pittsburgh say the most beautiful thing about PNC Park are the views out over the rivers and the beautiful bridges. But there was only one place that you could be in the park and watch the game and take in that view as well. And so we've made some minor adjustments to the seating along the Riverwalk, so now you can be in the view and watch the game too. So that's a good example of how we've worked with clubs. We were working with the AAA team for the Boston Red Sox in Worcester to build their new ballpark, and we have worked with Chelsea. As many of you know, Todd Bowley, one of our partners here, is a part of the purchase of the Chelsea Football Club, so we worked with them on getting some spruce up for their building as they plan their long-term future. We've worked with Paris basketball, planning for the Olympics in Paris. So we really are all over the place, and we've loved the projects that we've touched. We find that often people will say to us, since we are predominantly women, and not exclusively, but predominantly, is there something about a woman's touch that makes these projects better? And I often say, I don't know, not really. I think men like clean restrooms too. Like there's just making a building better and thinking about the experience that everyone has. Maybe we care about the civic component of it in a way that just translates to the bottom line. I think we never go in and say, how can we make money on this? I think we always go in and say, how can we make this better? And then it translates into being very profitable. And we really enjoyed that sort of carrying the banner on that and making these buildings feel like they are a part of our broader environment.
And what you did with the design at Dodger Stadium.
Well, I have loved that this building is one of a kind. I mean, really one of a kind. There's, you've got your Fenway and Wrigley's, and you can do the green steel and the brickwork and all of that with the newer versions of those, the Camden Yards and the and the Coors Field But this building so stands alone with this mid-century modern sort of crazy color scheme and the hexagonal boards. Thanks ANC, I know you guys are here today too. And it's been just wonderful taking this building that was thought of as groundbreaking in its time, and then along through about the 80s and 90s, if you look at architecture books in Los Angeles, Dodger Stadium doesn't even make the cut. You know, like it just wasn't a thing, and now it's a thing again. And I think that's sort of a testament to Los Angeles and its culture and its place in architecture. I also think it's a testament to our ownership and their devotion to the fans. It is not an accident that our attendance is the highest in Major League Baseball and that we've set records so many years. That does not happen, and I am just blown away, even having had a front row seat to it, with 10 out of 11 years having the divisional title, and with the foresight to invest in this building to make it fantastic, not just for the players and for those who can afford the premium seating and the private suites, but for Joe Fan. And I love this Centerfield Plaza for that reason. You know, we've got 2.5 acres of fun out here beyond center field. Our new front door, as Stan Kasten likes to call it. But if you think about this property we're on, we have more parking north of this building than we do south, and the fact that we couldn't even allow our fans to enter was just an amazing sort of reset on this. And so I've loved this building in so many ways and loved the achievements of the club over the years, and I've learned so much from my colleagues. And I think that's the other thing I would say, you ask about advice, is you never know where you're going to get a great idea, and in sports they don't always reside in a column. Like, you can get some of your best ideas about the food and beverage by talking to someone in marketing. You can get some of your best thoughts about in-game entertainment from the groundskeeper who's had to suffer through it for 9, there's so many resources because we're all fans. At some level, we're all fans. And so translating that into the strength of our jobs in sponsorship or in public relations or community relations or whatever it is, I think synthesizing all of that is part of what makes these jobs so much fun.
Thank you.